we've brought together 3 different facets, yet again, on the school safety issue. We're going to start off with Donna Michaelis, as I already had made reference to. She represents the Virginia Center for School and Campus Safety. We'll continue with Kurt Laverello, Executive Director of the School Safety for the Advocacy Council, and then Max is going to close the loop thereafter, representing his organization for Safe Schools for Alex. There's little doubt that of all the organizations, of all of the collaboration networks, of all of the communities, there is not a way that the IDIS community can't help address school safety. This is not to say fix it, this is not to say eliminate it, this is not to say make it all go away, but it is to say that we have so many different potential components here, whether it is the programmatic one, whether it is the public education one, whether it is the assessment to understand the details of the program within states or within jurisdictions. There's a lot that we can collectively do from the home office, as I refer to it, from the membership community, and from the broader collection that we bring to the table. So with all that said, I am passing the podium over to Donna.
Good morning. I am humbled to follow Max. I mean, it's such a tragedy, and I'm just, again, honored and humbled to follow after him. But I do want to say that, representing Virginia, that there is beauty from the ashes, that no matter where the school tragedy has occurred, we in Virginia have taken that to heart, and we have not wanted any of the suffering to be in vain, nor for it to be repeated. And so this is my mission. This is my mission field. For 37 years, I've been in public safety, working in school safety specifically, first for a law enforcement agency for 13 years, and then at the state level. And so I say all that to say it's not in vain. It's as horrible and tragic as it is. We're hoping to save others. So if I can figure out what I'm supposed to do with this thing, which way does it go? Big green button, that would be smart. There you go. So what is this? I have like 7 minutes, and so I'm going to fly through this. But I do want you to know I can make this PowerPoint available, and of course I'm always available for emails and phone calls. So a safe school has to be attacked from various levels. Physical safety, as we indicated, as Max indicated at Parkland, making sure there's a secure perimeter, secure physical safety, but also an emotional safety, the attachment that kids have to the school. As also indicated at Parkland, there was no attachment to the school, there was no engagement. And the psychological safety, about the trauma and how are we handling kids that have endured horrible home situations and incidences in the community. So what is needed in this field? Well, first of all, passion and dedication, and not people who just want to make a buck off of school safety. And again, I've often been asked, you know, why don't you go do this and do that? I'm in a public service position because this is where my heart is. This is what I want to do, is serve in a public venue. And as I can say, all of my staff has a public safety mission at heart. You also need legislation, and Virginia was one of the first school safety centers in the nation to be legislated and placed in a criminal justice agency. We stand apart from other school safety centers because we're not in a Department of Education where it can often get buried. It's also not in an institution of higher learning where it can take on the flavor of that university and kind of maybe repel other places. We are legislated, we are in state government, we're in the Public Safety Secretariat, and we are in a very nimble agency where we can respond to school safety initiatives and changing legislation quickly. We also must have partners, and one of the key pieces of our legislation is that all other state agencies have to work with me, whether they like me or not. It's in our legislation, and so when I go asking for money, when I go asking for partnerships, they have to say yes, so that's really good. And then the last thing is to have strong partnerships, and by that I mean strong programmatic partnerships, which I'll go over very quickly, but underneath of each of those programs, there needs to be training, resources, data collection, as Max said, and technical assistance. So this is our mantra, is that no matter what program area we're attacking in school safety, we are going to provide what our divisions, our law enforcement agencies need to fill those gaps and provide those services. So the Virginia model is one that a lot of other states in the nation have have attempted to copy in legislation. I was honored to be invited to speak to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission right after the tragedy, and we talked about threat assessment and what we were doing in Virginia. I was also honored to be on the President's Federal School Safety Commission after Parkland and offer suggestions about what's needed. We were very pleased that the schoolsafety.gov at DHS reached out to Virginia first and asked us to be one of their pilot sites and build out our profile on that site with all of our resources. And so all of the good work that Max has done and others in the aftermath of these tragedies, Virginia has learned from, we've embraced, and we've moved forward. So as I said, our legislation is in code. It was codified in July of 2000, and every year our General Assembly adds more mandates to what the Virginia Center for School and Campus Safety is supposed to do, covering all those things that I mentioned. So not only are we for lovers, but we are for legislation. Some of the programmatic things that are legislated is school security officer program certification, all school security officers, which are civilian employees of the school division. They can be armed in Virginia, but most often they are not. Our school resource officer program, which is law enforcement officers working in schools and armed. They are clearly law enforcement officers. We don't have school police in Virginia. They are very distinct things. And they are certified through the Center for School and Campus Safety. We have mandated behavioral threat assessment teams. We have a mandated school safety audit program. We have all sorts of other things that are mandated that I don't have time to go into. But again, we do this through partnerships. And we at the Virginia Center for School and Campus Safety, because we're in a Department of Criminal Justice Services, we serve all 400 plus law enforcement agencies. We provide training. So technically, I'm the director of the Public Safety Training and Virginia Center for School and Campus Safety centers. And we train law enforcement in K-12 schools, in public and private universities, and also in their agencies. So again, as I said, strong programs based on training, resource, data collection, and those are the 4 programs that I'm going to go over today. We have more, but these are the basis by which we do everything else. So school resource officers, we're proud to say we have one of the most robust SRO programs in the nation. We've had SROs in Virginia since the mid-1950s. In 1990s, they became a governor's priority, and we began funding them through state grants. It was actually when I began work at DCJS, I was an SRO grant monitor. At the time, I had 357 SRO grants, and we have just grown that program tremendously. One of those things is our SRO Incentive Grant Fund. This year, it was traditionally $1.7 million from the year 2000 until about 2019. In 2018, after Parkland, the governor added $3 million, bringing it to $4.7 million. In January of this year, Governor Youngkin added $22.5 million in an effort to put an SRO in every public school in Virginia. We have just allocated almost all of that funding for this year. So that's for 2 years. And we fund SROs and school security officers. SROs by site, I am happy by where they're placed. I'm happy to say that we have a 94% saturation rate of SROs in high schools. We have a 90% saturation rate of SROs in middle schools and a 50% saturation rate of SROs in elementary schools. And this was prior to the money that the governor just gave us. We also do school climate surveys. Again, building on what Max said, data is important. We collect data on students and staff's perceptions of safety every year in our middle and high schools, and all staff in K through 5. K through 12. We analyze that data. We spit out an individual school report, and then a regional report, and then a state report, so they can compare their climate in their school across the board. Just like Max was saying, it's really important as a state entity, if we're collecting data, we need to give it back to them in a useful form, and this is what they say. So when our General Assembly was looking at pulling SROs, we were able to say, well, you're going to have to talk to the students and staff because they say they really want them and that they feel safer because they're there. Other things that we do around our SRO program, we have a school law enforcement partnership guide and a standardized memorandum of understanding between schools and police. And schools that have SROs have to use our model MOU. Then we have the guide that explains why we have what we have in our MOU. We have a 5-day, 40-hour SRO training curriculum. We have it for school resource officers, but also for the principal because they need to know. We have a behavioral threat assessment training that mandates including SROs on the team because our legislation requires SROs on the team. We've developed an information sharing guide, and we provide hundreds of trainings, both online and in person throughout the year. One of the new initiatives under our SRO program is our Handle with Care program. This is a program we stole from West Virginia because we are not above stealing stuff from other states. West Virginia started this excellent program where if law enforcement came across a child at an incident that witnessed a traumatic event that may affect their performance in school the next day, they simply send a note to the principal, handle this child with care with no other details. It is a wonderful school law enforcement partnership that helps reduce suspensions and expulsions and alerts the school to provide supports in case this child is experiencing trauma from an incident that they witnessed either in their home or their community. Under threat assessment, we've had threat assessment teams mandated in Virginia since 2008. For those of you that remember, Virginia Tech occurred in 2007, and our General Assembly responded, because Virginia is for legislation, that we would mandate threat assessment teams in higher ed. In 2013, after Sandy Hook occurred in 2012, Virginia mandated threat assessment teams in K-12 schools. We are the only state in the nation that requires threat assessment teams in both K-12 and higher education. We have a law that says that not only do each school has to have a team that it directs who has to be on that team. It's 4 people. It is the principal or an administrator, someone with information, experience in instruction like a teacher, a counselor, and a law enforcement. They also have to assess and intervene with all individuals, not just students. So a parent, an outsider, a former student, anyone who makes a threat, that information goes to the threat assessment team, and they have to assess threats to self and others. Many threat assessment teams in other states only direct them to assess threats to others. We know that a lot of homicidal students are also suicidal. It's really very important to send those students information through the threat assessment team so they can gather information from throughout the community to help assist. We also are directed to have model policies which have been replicated across the nation for how to do threat assessment teams. We collect data across the schools, and we then put that data out. So every year we have to collect annually all the threats that are assessed. We get information on the target, the subject, the interventions. We get information on how often the team meets. We ask information about who participates in those. We ask about the outcomes, and I'm happy to say that 99.7% of all threats assessed in Virginia have been averted. That means that's a hugely successful metric in order to give folks. You can see that before the pandemic, we were up to almost 18,000 threats per year. It dropped down because we went virtual, and this year we just concluded our survey yesterday, so we'll have that data before the end of the year to see where we are. And then schools can also see where they fall in that matrix as to whether their school is assessing enough or properly. This tells us about the threat assessment cases, and as you can see, threats to self has gone up dramatically over the years. Traditionally, it's 3/4 of all threats assessed are students who only want to harm themselves, and I'll tell you where that led us. So one of the things that we're mandated to do is create a threat assessment management tool, which led to my relationship with IGES. 2 years ago, the General Assembly passed legislation saying that DCJS, the agency I work for, had to create a threat assessment tool that interacted with all student records management systems across the state so we can gather that information electronically rather than by the survey method that we're currently using. We're hoping to have that RFP on the street by the beginning of 2023 and get that tool active and out in the public. That will give them real information and us information on the interventions and supports that schools are using and law enforcement are using to divert people from a pathway of violence. We also have a DHS grant that we received to expand not only our K-12 public schools and higher education threat assessment teams, but into community behavioral threat assessment teams, because that's what we're missing. That's the team that catches what happens when these students are no longer in school or have been expelled or didn't go on to college, or if they're not in college, they're in the community and might harm schools. We are developing these community behavior assessment models to, again, segue and work with our K-12 and higher ed teams. We have a perfect model of how that works in several of our school divisions in Virginia already, and we are hoping to expand that greatly with our new DHS grant. School safety audits and crisis management, this is our physical assessment tool. We are required in code to do safety audits for all K-12 schools. That conducts a survey of all schools administrators on their practices, what they're doing in terms of physical structure, drills. We do a division survey of all superintendents every year. They have to certify to the Virginia Center for School and Campus Safety that they have reviewed their crisis plan and send recommendations to us about what they need to improve. They have to do a school safety inspection checklist and certify to us every 3 years that they have walked the school with a group of professionals and assessed the safety and security vulnerabilities there. And then, as I mentioned, we do a school climate survey. So we have a uniform survey, so we have uniform data across all middle and high schools. We have developed a lot of new resources, a division guide, a model crisis guide for students. We have one on special education. So how do we make sure that we're including students with special needs in our drills and in our crisis planning? And are we making the right decisions there? So these are 3 new documents we've just put out. One of the ones I'm most excited about is we launched at the beginning of this year a $6.5 million digital mapping program for schools. So we found $6.5 million hanging around, and I asked our director, who asked our governor, can we put this out and have our schools apply to us for reimbursement if we allow them to digitally map. This is by Collaborative Response Graphics. They take, this is bin Laden stuff, where they actually use a Google map of oversight-oriented true north, take them, digitally map the school floor plans, walk the school, superimpose them over top, put it on a battleship grid so that when law enforcement needs to respond to door number 20 at G7, they all have the map in their cars, they all know exactly where to go, and they can respond quicker. We launched this in January. We have mapped 1,000 of our 2,000 schools, over half of our school divisions already, and we're putting in legislation to hopefully get them to give us money to do all higher education institutions. We've also partnered with another tragic event, Platte Canyon of 2006. John Michael Keyes established the I Love You Guys Foundation after his daughter Emily Keyes died because a drifter came in the back door, held her class hostage, and she ended up murdered. Standard response protocol and standard reunification method came out of that organization. It uniformly gives all schools the same codes so that across Virginia, everyone will know what a lockdown, what a hold, what a secure, what evacuate, and what shelter is and means. That's what teachers need. They don't need a crisis plan this big. They need, tell me what to do right now, tell me how to do it so I can make sure my kids are safe. Standard reunification method talks about how you reunite kids and parents in a safe and quick manner. And we are so excited to be rolling out this Virginiaized version that talks about our drills required, how they're required, how they should be orchestrated, and this is being rolled out as we speak. We have an active attack training program based on Texas's ALERT, Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training. We have a civilian response and casualty care program. That's for civilians. That's basically a stop the bleed and run, hide, fight, although alert uses avoid, deny, defend words. We also are training law enforcement, so when we have 5 law enforcement agencies responding to one school, they know how to work together, they know how to enter, they all know the same codes, they're not having to use these hand signals, they know what they're doing because they've worked together and trained together, and we are launching that now. We also have a critical incident response video and guide for principals to use to train their teachers at the beginning of the year. Again, we are working to develop age-appropriate videos and lessons for K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12 that build on the avoid, deny, defend wording. We don't obviously want kindergartners fighting, but we do want them avoiding. And so we will age-appropriately create videos and lesson plans for teachers to teach their students what to do in an active attack situation. And lastly, because of our data from our threat assessment, we realized that we needed to do something about the suicidality of our students and the mental health concerns that our threat assessment data revealed. So we applied for a grant to BGA. We got $2 million. That's how we're instituting Handle with Care. We're doing mental health pathways for prevention training for school administrators and teachers. We're putting them into an e-learning modules and pushing them out through our LMS system so we can get greater access to teachers that can't get to us. We're also doing a lot of videos. We also launched a $4 million media campaign. It was $1 million, and we got a 4-to-1 return on it, and it was called No Talk Ask, and it was youth to youth talking about suicide prevention, putting out the message that if you need help, contact someone you trust, sending them to our page for resources. We also have an OK to Speak Out campaign. This is on threat assessment, aberrant behavior, youth talking to youth that if you see something, say something. If you see something on social media that disturbs you, or if you are a kid that feels like you want to harm someone, here's the number you call, and here are some resources, and here are the contacts that you can make. And it is on TV, radio, YouTube, and Snapchat, and TikTok. And I put this up there because for 19 years, our center was funded with 2 personnel, 2 full-time people. We begged, borrowed, and scraped other folks in, but in 2019, because of the tragedy in Parkland, because our governor recognized that other states were coming to Virginia asking us what we were doing and how we were doing it, they realized they needed to fund us. And so all of these folks now work for the Center for School and Campus Safety in Virginia. We've got $4 million with funding. We merged with our law enforcement training section because we knew that they needed to help support our K-12 and higher ed, and I have specific program experts in each of those areas I've previously discussed. As I said, we do hundreds of trainings every year. And we do 6 major conferences. One of them's not up there. But the most important one I want to tell you about is in October, we're hosting a National Threat Assessment Conference for educational institutions. Anyone is welcome. It's at Virginia Beach in October, so good place to be. Not as nice as Florida, but still very nice. We have national and international experts. The last time we hosted this conference, we had 1,000 people, the first time out of the gate, from 38 states and 3 countries. And so it's an effort to bring everyone together to share what we know, what other folks are doing, and highlight lessons learned and how we can move forward. And as I said, we're pushing out an e-learning. If there's anything I can do for anyone, please be sure and email or call me. It is a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Kurt Laverello, and I currently serve as the Executive Director of the School Safety Advocacy Council. And I'm going to go through a couple of things just to kind of tell you a little bit about my background. We'll give you the very quick Reader's Digest version, but then get into some of the meat and potatoes that I think I'd like to share with this group. And thank you for the invite to be here. I met a great group of distinguished folks last night at the reception, and even more this morning, so it certainly is a pleasure to be here. So my background is law enforcement in South Florida, in Broward County, where you heard Max talk about the incident that took place there at Parkland. I began my career in 1980, so I'm date myself, And in Broward County then, I worked for a smaller police department with about 200 people called the North Lauderdale Police Department. We were later absorbed into the much larger Broward County Sheriff's Office. And so I spent about half of my career there, a little over half of my career there, and then went up to the neighboring Palm Beach County and went to work for the school district police department there. So I bring a unique aspect of having served in a school SRO role and an SRO supervisor role in both a city, county-run SRO program as well as a school district-based program. It was when I retired and when I was submitting my retirement papers, I was one of 3 officers, and some of you may have heard of the National Association of School Resource Officers, NASRO. There were 3 of us, literally, that started that program sitting at a hotel, much like this one evening, when we got together and we said, hey, we're really starting to see a need for some collaboration around the country. And so I was proud to be one of the founders of that organization. When I was retiring, they tapped me to serve as their executive director. I went to D.C., spent a lot of time in D.C., got to work with several of you like George and many of you that are in this room in my role there at NASRO. In 2004, I got to a point where I was just about really tired of thinking that law enforcement was going to enforce our way out of the school safety issue. When I came into NASRO, it was right before Columbine had occurred, and I was asked to go to D.C. at that time when President Clinton put together the Commission for School Safety back after that incident occurred. And I've since served on 3 different panels that the White House has had. That one, the one after the Virginia Tech incident, and the one after the Sandy Hook incident that then Vice President Biden hosted. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about from that perspective, from this federal response, because I think a lot of the things that Max pointed out are well taken. We have some issues federally that we need to put our hands around, and sadly enough, since Columbine, we haven't done it. And so I continue to serve on the IACP's Juvenile Justice Committee, a committee they asked me to serve on. They said, you know, you only have to do 1 or 2 years, Kurt. And I'm now on it 18 years with IACP's Juvenile Justice Committee. And part of what we do here with the School Safety Advocacy Council is there's a training component. We are the host of, you probably have seen it out there, we host the National School Safety Conference every year. Ironically, we had it in this hotel about 2.5 weeks ago, and we had about a little over 1,000 people here, along with the Florida Sheriff's Association that was here with us that week, here at the Omni. So the training is one side of what we do with the School Safety Advocacy Council. We're hosting in another month. I have the dreaded mission. I have to go to Hawaii, where we're actually put together the first Hawaii School Safety Conference. I know my wife is, yelling at me, screaming at me that she can't make it, but I am going to bring her to Orlando instead. So we do a lot of the training around the country, but we also work very closely with school districts. We have several school districts that we perform physical assessments for. We've done probably well over 2,000 actual school safety assessments, probably within the last 2 years, in some of the larger districts. And, every time I have the opportunity to hear experts like Max or any other school safety folks that are out there talking, I listen to some of the issues. It's bothered me over the years that as I travel to these schools, I continue to see these issues. So my comment over the years is, and the beauty of now working for myself is I'm the only one that can fire me. And that's kind of a nice position to have. I've come close a couple of times, I'll be honest with you. But one of the things I think when we start looking at this holistically across the country, whether it's locally, the school district, we have still failed miserably to change the mindset. And when I say that, I mean it to the point that I hate, each year we come to these conferences. We hosted one here, and for almost every year that we have the conference, it seems like I'm opening that conference with a tribute to kids who lost their lives. And I'm so tired of doing that. And when we sat down with my committee, I sit back and I go, why aren't we ever changing the mindset? And the mindset being, why is school safety only seem to surface after these tragedies occur? It's not something that should be, it should be the priority of every school district, every city, every community, 24/7, 365 days a year, regardless of whether we've had a mass casualty incident at a school, but it's not. And part of that, and I get asked this from the media a lot, why do you think that is? And we are such a resilient nation. We bounce back from tragedies very, very quickly, and there's a lot in that is very, very good. But there's a lot that we miss because we are so quick to become complacent again, and then we become vulnerable again. And then we see a tragedy again. And when I speak to school principals and leaders, and I say, the sad part is, as I sit here, and I'll tell you this today, as we all sit here trying to look into this issue of school safety, we know right now there's some clown out there, some kid that is doing that research that Max spoke of and is looking to be the next better school shooter. It's happening right now. Somebody's on that line, and there are probably several of them, and we don't know when that kid's button is going to be pushed. I spoke to a group of school administrators recently in San Diego, and I asked them to show me a raised hand if they thought they could go out right now and take a human life. And most of them didn't raise their hand. There were very few hands were up in the audience. And as a police officer, if I asked that question in my law enforcement community, I'd see a lot more hands go up. The problem is, I asked them the follow-up question, if I had your child and I was about to seriously hurt or kill your child, could you take my life? And almost every hand went up, because that's their button, right? That's the button. We don't know where the button sits in the scale for all these kids that are in our schools right now, these kids that Max spoke of and showed those profiles. Because if you take those profiles that Max shared with you, I promise you this, most people in a school are going to be able to come up with somebody they think, or maybe several somebodies they think, that meets that profile. And that's the challenge. I'm so glad to hear Donna mention about the threat assessment piece, because I think we're really, truly moving in the right direction there, understanding and connecting the dots. But I will tell you this, I was at a district last week, which I'll remain nameless, very large district, one of the top 25 districts in the country. And they have zero threat assessment, and nobody's sharing information. Law enforcement, when I met with them in this community, they said we'd never hear anything from the school district. School district says we don't want to give stuff to law enforcement because they may misuse it. And meanwhile, these kids are slipping through the cracks in this community, and they're ripe. They're absolutely ripe for something to be repetitive and see it. And I got to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, it is extremely frustrating. I mean, I've been doing this before Columbine, and I've seen too many tragedies. And there are a lot of people who don't want to listen and don't want to take the steps necessary. So what is the key? And I believe this, and this is just according to me, but I believe the key is our leadership, our school superintendents, our police chiefs, our sheriffs, our mayors, the people who run these towns and school districts. That leadership is key. Now, from a law enforcement perspective, we have challenges. You heard Max share some of the tragedies, what happened with Deputy Peterson at Parkland. I could never climb inside that deputy's head and understand what went through his head or what did not go through his head that tragic day, or what went on, the absolutely horrific response from law enforcement out in Texas. It was disgusting. It was absolutely, sitting here from a law enforcement perspective, listening to gunshots go off and nobody going down that hallway was absolutely disgusting from me and from a law enforcement perspective. and I know there's going to be a lot of accountability out there at some point. But the fact remains, how do we change that culture? How do we change that thinking? Now, I'd like to think that these incidents and a few more that are out there like that are isolated, but think about the challenges right now facing us in law enforcement. In Palm Beach County, I was speaking to their assistant chief just yesterday. She said, Kurt, right now, we're 78 school resource officers short in the county. By the time we hire one, we may have lost two. We're having a real hiring challenge, not only in Florida, but across the nation, on hiring law enforcement in general. Dade County School Police has had to revert to taking an officer directly out of the academy with zero experience and putting them into a school. This presents another set of problems. When you have officers in a school with absolutely no experience, they've never made one arrest at all. And then we wind up seeing on the evening news that officer handcuffs some 6-year-old kid and drags him out of the school, and we wonder why. So we have some real challenges in front of us that we've got to overcome. But I'll bring it to an end by saying this, and I know there's going to be some questions, and there are some opportunities out there. Max's slide really brought to light some of those opportunities that are out there for us that we often miss. I get asked from the media all the time. Every time there's a school shooting, there are probably 10, 15 articles that come toward us and ask us for our comments. And one of the most common questions I get asked is, what is the number one thing a school can do to hopefully try to prevent this from occurring again? And they're looking for an answer like metal detectors or ballistic shields or the AR-15 in the officer's office, or they're looking for something like that. The truth of the matter is, and this is according to me again, it doesn't cost anything. It's the people things that we can do that can make the biggest difference. Know your kids. We know by the Secret Service, the study back after Columbine and the restudy they did, we know that over 70%, as Max alluded to, 70% of these kids communicated that they were going to do these horrible things before they did it. In Columbine, it was over a year before. I read Klebold Harris's diaries a year before. They knew. They knew our schools better than the adults in that school knew our schools. When we go out and we do an assessment, sometimes people joke, principals hate me when we get done doing an assessment because I always tell them, you got to remove the principal spot in front of the school. They go, what, I'm going to lose my parking spot? Yeah, and so is the SRO. The spot that says school resource officer. Some simple thing, because if I walk into that school and I see those 2 parking spots empty, that tells me that 2 leaders in a school crisis are not going to be there. And that's going to be the ground setting. And they, sadly enough, if you went back and you read as far back as Klebold and Harris, or you read some of the diaries of these kids or the comments they wrote, they knew that. They knew how many kids were where and how many kids they could take out. So we have that opportunity to know our kids, communicate with our kids. I was just sharing with George, there's a great study out of a university in Pennsylvania that talked a great amount of their student body, over 80% of their student body, and they talked about threats and things like that, and they concluded that after talking to the kids, after all we've seen, Parkland, Verdi, Sandy Hook, 50% of their students, just recently in the study, said they still wouldn't report it if they knew somebody was threatening their school. 50%, half, still wouldn't, even after all we've seen. So those lines of communication are increasingly important. We've got to work to do that, and I think that's where the leadership comes in supporting our school resource officers, our law enforcement agencies to work with schools and understand there's a common ground to keep. The school is just a reflection of that community. We've got to work together in that. I'm glad to see that threat assessment piece, as I stated. And I'll leave it at that. I know some of you may have some questions at the end of this. One of the things, our website is schoolsafety911.org. And lastly, one of the things with Max and his reporting program he has of the dashboard, I can't say enough about how important stuff like that is just to get parents engaged. I mean, we released, about a month ago, we released a parent report card on our website. And interestingly enough, it's just a 10-question guide. I figured we thought it was a committee of mine that I put together, and they said, hey, you know, every day parents are dropping off kids at school. I said, let's give them a report card where they can see if they see a door open or they see doors propped open, which is every school every day around our nation. If they see kids arriving and no adult supervision, if their classroom doors are left unlocked, just a simple thing that they can either visualize themselves or ask their child about. They fill out this report card, they send it in to the principal of that school. If they don't hear a response back, they send it to the superintendent, and then they send it to an elected official, and it goes up the chain, and to bring accountability. Well, when I did that, when we released that, man, oh man, I got calls from principals and superintendents saying, what are you trying to do here? And the bottom line is we're trying to keep kids safe. You know, so with that, I appreciate this opportunity to come before you. Anything we can do at the School Safety Advocacy Council, please don't hesitate to give us a call, and I'll be around here as well, and if you have questions afterwards, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I want to just follow up and just continue on what I was talking about earlier. So this is I gave a presentation in Pennsylvania, and I presented to their legislature about our dashboard, and I went there primarily because I really wanted to open people's eyes. Like I said, sunlight's the best disinfectant, and when you look at Pennsylvania's data, so this is all public. You know, I talked about, remember in my previous presentation, all those folders. You know, Pennsylvania, you got to click on one folder, next folder, next folder. Their website was built like 17 years ago, and when I analyzed their data, and this is just unbelievable, 80% of their school districts in Pennsylvania reported 0 incidents of academic dishonesty. 17 of the 20 largest school districts in Pennsylvania reported less than 5 incidents of academic dishonesty. Philadelphia, with 122,000 students, reported 0 incidents of academic dishonesty. Pittsburgh reported 3 incidents of academic dishonesty. So when we talk about data, when we talk about school safety, accuracy and being honest is so important. We cannot make schools safer if the school districts are not doing their part or not reporting accurately. Almost half of Pennsylvania school districts reported 0 incidents of disorderly conduct. 0 incidents of disorderly conduct. Cyber harassment, extremely prevalent. 73% of Pennsylvania school districts reported 0 incidents of cyber harassment. Pittsburgh had 8. Philadelphia, 5. Here's bullying. In Pennsylvania, though, it doesn't really exist. 53% of their school districts reported 0 bullying incidents. And I met with the Secretary of Education when I was there. I showed him this stuff. So when Kurt talks about leadership, I 100% agree. It's all about leadership. And so that's why we created this dashboard. People need to know what's going on, and if schools are not being, they're not being honest, they're not being accurate, they need to be held accountable. So in Florida, now I want to talk about some of the issues that we're having in Florida. So this is our SESSOR program. This is my dashboard. It's the School Environmental Safety Incident Reporting System. This was a presentation that was just done at the MSD Commission last month. And so these are all the categories. So as we look at this data, keep in mind, level 1 are the greatest threats. So you got aggravated battery, arson, homicide, kidnapping, sexual battery. Level 2, still very serious, but less serious. Level 3, and then level 4 is going to be mostly vaping and bullying. Okay, so here let's look at the level 1. So this is an analysis that the Florida Department of Education did on all the incident reporting that schools are reporting to the State Department of Education. And what you see is that every line is a school district. We have 67 school districts, and so you've got some school districts that are reporting 0 level 1 incidents last year. Aggravated battery, arson, sexual battery, kidnapping, and some are reporting 4 incidents per 1,000 students. You know, when you look at this, the line should be, you know, pretty level, and it is until. But you got schools over here that are reporting extreme lag. Got schools reporting zeros, 0 level 1 incidents for the entire school year. Here's level 2 incidents. So this includes physical attack, battery, weapons possession, drug sales, robbery, burglary, sexual assault. Now the weapons, the 2,200 weapon possession incidents, 277 of them involve firearms, but not all of them. So a bat could be a weapon. Anything that has a projectile and that has an explosive charge could be considered a weapon. BB guns are not considered weapons, but look at the range. You know, you've got the ranges from close to 0 to 23 incidents per 1,000. And so this is what my commission is going to be investigating, is why are this huge variation in data? How can you have some school districts reporting very little and then some reporting 23 incidents per 1,000 students? Here's level 3 incidents, and so this is the most common: fighting, drug use, threat, sexual harassment. And you've got it mostly stays pretty flat, until you get to about 11 or 12, and then you've got school districts that are reporting 80 level 3 incidents per 1,000 kids. So our commission is looking at this data and saying, how is this possible? How can there just be such a huge variation? And so that's why we formed a subcommittee to really delve into the details and start to analyze this, and because we've got to have accurate data to make schools safer. And that's why Pennsylvania's data is so alarming. And that's why I wanted to show it to them, show it to their Secretary of Education. Here's a level 4 data. That comprises tobacco, mostly vaping, which is a huge issue on all of our K-12 campus, bullying, harassment, alcohol. And you've got the variability in numbers from 4 incidents per 1,000 to 45 incidents per 1,000 is just really stark and alarming. So when you look at the top 3 incident categories for 2021, usually it's fighting is the number 1, and last year it was tobacco, which is vaping. So this is a major problem on all of our campuses. There is a major lawsuit that is going on right now against Juul. It's a billions and billions of dollar lawsuit. A lot of school districts around the country are suing Juul, and it's a big problem because not only are kids becoming addicted, ambulances are having to go to schools because kids are ODing. You also have a tremendous amount of resources being developed to this, resources are having to be thrown at this issue. You've got school districts that are hiring SROs just to deal with the vaping issue. And every vaping issue, it takes 45 minutes to an hour for an SRO to write up that report. That's resources not going to safety and security. So we really need to get a handle on this. And there's a lot of things that schools can do to lower the volume of vaping on campus. I want to just shift gears a little bit, talk about threat assessments, and I'm glad Donna's here to take a look at this as well. So in Florida, let me get back to my computer. So we recently did a survey of our school districts, and again, along with the school incident reporting, there showed major inconsistencies in the threat assessment data. You've got 18 school districts that have a dedicated software system provided by 4 different vendors. 2 school districts had developed their own proprietary threat assessment system, and 21 districts are using some aspect of their student information system. 9 school districts, including Miami-Dade County, which is the 4th largest school district in the entire United States, is still using pen and paper to do their threat assessments. And the reason I want to talk about this is because threat assessments is the #1 tool we have to preventing acts of targeted violence, not only in K through 12 and higher ed, but it's also in after you graduate high school. This is also a major gap in law enforcement. Many law enforcement agencies do not have the resources to build these threat management units in law enforcement as well. And so when I go and I talk about that every law enforcement agency needs to have a threat management unit. Because what's happening, out of school, they need to be dealing with, after they get older, they need to be dealing with. There's no requirement in Florida of threat management after the threat assessment. So threat management is a part of threat assessment. But in law enforcement, they're really good at collecting data, and that's part of a threat assessment. But managing the threat is the key, and I talked about that earlier. It's not good enough just to suspend or expel a kid. It's not good enough to commit a Baker Act or arrest somebody. That doesn't remove the threat. It's about managing the threat, which is so critical. And that's the piece that we're hopefully going to be building here in Florida. We just formed a subcommittee dealing with this issue as well. So threat management, Broward County just did a survey of our threat assessment, an audit, and what they found was that 70% of the high-level threats did not include a safety plan. So for instance, if you've got a kid that's threatening to shoot up a school, and like the murderer, the Parkland murderer, had to be escorted, part of that safety plan is checking their backpack every day. And we had a tremendous high volume of Broward County cases, which didn't even include a safety plan. So it's really getting the state up to speed so that we're doing it right and we can prevent acts of targeted violence. So threat assessment teams have been required in Florida since 2018, and then we set forth all the participants. We were having a big problem in Florida where schools were doing threat assessments, and they weren't even involving law enforcement. And law enforcement is a critical piece to having them on that team, on that threat assessment team. Florida law requires all school-based threat assessments to use the CSTAG model. This is Dr. Dewey Cornell's model. This is what we adopted. But one of the criticisms that of the Parkland shooter is that dots were not connected. That's what threat assessment does. That's what threat management does. It connects all the dots. Effective school safety strategies are generally divided between prevention and harm mitigation. And that's the key, is you can do the harm mitigation, okay, and you got to do the prevention as well. And that's why threat assessments are so important. This is analysis of the threat assessment data here in Florida, and you've got every school district on the bottom, and what you're seeing is some school districts, like for instance Madison County, they reported 70 threat assessments per 1,000 kids. That's on the far left, okay? And then school districts on the right, like Bay County, reporting 5 threat assessments per 1,000 kids. So that's why we formed this subcommittee to really figure out what's going on here. You've got Miami-Dade County, the 4th largest school district in the United States. That is the 4th line from the right. They're doing 0.8 threat assessments per 1,000 kids. Maybe it's because they are only doing pencil and paper. It's about training. We're going to be analyzing this whole situation to figure out how is it possible that some districts are doing 70 threat assessments per 1,000 kids, and some, like Miami-Dade County, are doing 0.3, 0.8. And if you look at this a different way, Madison County, which only has 2,400 kids, and Taylor County, which has 2,700 children, have similar student populations, but Taylor only conducted 28 threat assessments, but Madison did 171. How is that possible with the same student population, but just a tremendous number of threat assessments? Lee County, they have this similar student population, about 94,000. Pinellas, 96,000. Polk, 105,000. But Lee County did 241 threat assessments. Pinellas did 428. And Polk did 1,000 threat assessments. So that's what really needs to be understood. Orange County, they have 199,000 students, 60,000 fewer students than Broward, but they conducted 1,100 threat assessments, and Broward only conducted 868 threat assessments. Number of threat assessments conducted in Palm Beach, similar to these other districts, but Palm Beach has a tremendous amount of more students. Same number of threat assessments, but how can you have the same number of threat assessments, Palm Beach and Hernando, when Hernando only has 22,000 kids? Here's Miami-Dade. Okay, similar number of threat assessments during the year, but Sarasota did the same number of threat assessments with a fraction number of kids. So that's what really needs to be investigated, and that's why we started this subcommittee. We're going to be hopefully trying to form a database to really look at this data, and also, because we've got kids that are transferring districts, transferring school districts, and when one kid transfers a school district, you've got to have that data and to the new school, and sometimes it's taking weeks, and that's not a good thing. So we're really doing a lot in Florida to improve not only our data on the school incident data, but also on the threat assessment side. And I'm really happy, to see all the progress that Virginia's making, and they're definitely a leader in this area, and we're going to reach out to you.